This is the Content and AI podcast, episode number 11. As generative AI tools are introduced into consumer products and enterprise workflows, the core work of content designers and UX writers still feels familiar, but the context for the work and many of its details are evolving. Over the past year at Booking.com, where he's been working on an AI powered travel planning app, Chris Cameron has seen firsthand how the traditional concerns of content strategy and UX writing manifest in the world of generative AI.
Welcome to the Content and AI podcast, where experts on artificial intelligence share their wisdom with the content community. Our mission is to demystify and democratize AI, to make its principles and practices accessible to all content practitioners. And now here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 11 of the Content and AI podcast. I'm really happy today to welcome to the show Chris Cameron. Chris is a principal UX writer at Booking.com, the big travel booking agency based in Amsterdam. Welcome to the show, Chris. Tell the folks a little bit more about what you do there at Booking.
Well, thanks, Larry, for having me. I'll give a bit of my background as well. Like yourself, I started in journalism and then got into copywriting. And after moving to Amsterdam from the US at a very young age, 25, I guess, I eventually I joined Booking in 2016, a little over 7 years ago. And back then, the role was actually called copywriting. There was about 25 of us. And over the years, we sort of discovered that we were actually UX writers, and we've become now this community of over 80 UX writers. And now I am a principal UX writer. And the area I look after, we call writing systems. And what that is sort of like the writing version of design systems, but it's not so much a system. It's more like the tools and the workflows that we use to get our jobs done. So my role is to work on those tools and work on those workflows and make sure it's easy for our writers to get their jobs done in an efficient and easy way, and so they can create high quality content. And more recently, one of the areas I've been interested in looking into is Gen AI and how we might use that to improve our workflows.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to have you on the show. You told me about this the product you developed, the trip planner that's based on AI. Can you tell us a little bit about how that project arose and how you got involved with it?
Yeah, definitely. So my involvement with AI and Gen AI in general kind of started when ChatGPT came out. I think a lot of people took notice back then. That was like late last year, 2022. And I started playing around with it. I'm always a bit of a nerd and like early adopter of technology. So I started using it for different things. I have a toddler at home, so I was actually using it to create bedtime stories for him. And I would say, let's ask the story robot what kind of story you want to read tonight. And he would just generate a story idea, and ChatGPT would help us with the rest. It was a lot of fun. But professionally, I started thinking, okay, how could this be useful for our writers at Booking, or how Booking as a company could use it? And in early this year, 2023, the company was like seriously looking at Gen AI and thinking, okay, what are we going to do with this? And because I was sort of already exploring it, I got pulled into some early discussions, and I thought, okay, we're going to have some brainstorms, some chats about how can Gen AI did, but actually the company was already like, let's go build a Gen AI chatbot and put it in the app. And this is going to be the only thing you focus on for the next couple of months. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Let's roll. And so basically a task force was formed within the company, sometimes called a tiger team. We called it sometime. And it was representatives, multiple people from writing, design, research, product, and then also machine learning, our iOS and Android engineers, of course, data science, and marketing and legal. It was a big team. I mean, in the end, it was almost like having a little startup within the company. It was about 70 people, and the UX work stream was sort of one half of it, and the other half was all the machine learning and the engineering that was going on. And this sort of kicked off in mid-April when we started this, and 2 months later, we were able to launch the AI trip planner in June. And just so people understand what it is we built basically an AI chatbot into the Booking app, and people can chat with it and ask their travel questions, and it can help them, get inspiration for where to go or what hotel to stay at or build an itinerary, these sorts of things. And it integrates some of the traditional booking experience, like with carousels and images and property ratings and things like that right into the chat. So it's like feels a bit more natural. And then if they tap on a property, they can go straight into the booking process and make a reservation. And so a lot of it uses some of our existing machine learning knowledge we've built up at the company over the years, and then relies a bit on OpenAI, ChatGPT to do that generative AI piece and really create a nice conversation. So if people want to try it out, if they're in the US or they can VPN to the US, they can sign into the booking app on iOS and Android and make sure their language is set to English, and they should see the AI trip planner right on the home screen.
Oh, that's it. That sort of gets at some of the complexity around this, because I know you localize into like 50 languages and cultures and something like
Yeah, I
that.
think
But
45. Yeah.
yeah, and so right now it's just English only and in the US. So that's interesting. And I'm really, as you talk about that, I'm wondering, like from a user perspective, it's almost like just a UI thing. For an end user, you could almost perceive it that way. Oh, another way to interact with this thing and do my trip planning. But on the back end, like you said, it's 70 people on this Tiger team that put that together. How similar was it to like other projects? Because as a principal, you've worked on a lot of different projects, probably at this scale. How much of it was familiar and similar, and how much of it was new? Like, uh, yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot that was familiar to just a normal, building a product, but there were some key differences. For example, or for working with the Gen AI product specifically, it's such a new thing that there's not a lot of existing research. So if you're gonna go to your researcher and say, okay, what do we know about, Gen AI? It's like, well, they're still learning too. So a lot of that was involved, looking at what is out there in the market, what competitors are doing, but then we were also able to combine that with the existing understanding of user needs, because essentially this is a search experience that we've been dealing with for a long time at Booking. So we know a lot about what the user's looking for in that moment when they come to the app. So the needs didn't change, but the way they were expressing those needs is the whole new thing. And in the early stages when we were trying to like test something, it's not that easy to build a Gen AI prototype. Like if you're building a prototype in Figma, you can't really insert the AI part in there very easily. Maybe soon that will be a thing. But so we had to wait until we actually had like a working build of the tool where we could play with it internally. And that's when we started actually doing a lot of like the understanding of, okay, what's working, what's not, that sort of thing. So there was that challenge. But from like a content and writing perspective, the biggest difference when like working on a Gen AI product was that you kind of have to let go of control over the words and the content that's coming out of this thing. Because when AI is generating the text, and as a writer, you're seeing, oh, this isn't great, we need to improve something, then the only way to do that is to actually go to the source and dive into the code and the prompts and start making improvements right there. And that was a new thing for us, because we're used to working in Figma with designers and then handing off a design to the engineering team and say, okay, go build it with the words I wrote. And instead it's now I need to go talk to the engineer and get into their code, or the prompts as it were, because they're just English in the end, and sit down with them and make improvements. And that's where we actually made some of our biggest gains, was sitting next to an engineer or virtually via Zoom and saying, actually, let's rephrase that prompt this way, and if we insert this instruction, it'll talk more naturally, that sort of thing. So we have always had a bit of a technical piece to our role here at Booking, because we do a lot of that content management of all the translations that we manage in all those languages. So we've traditionally worked very closely with engineers to make sure that everything's working in every language on our traditional UI copy stuff. But this was definitely something new, to sit side by side with an engineer and like get into their code. And that was actually a really important piece, because that meant the writing role was really like critical to this phase of development. Just by applying the writing craft into the prompts, we were able to make these really big improvements.
It sounds like some kind of like extreme co-writing, that you're like doing it because you still have the same concerns about governance of voice and tone and style and accuracy of the information and all that. But you're going way deeper in the tech stack to implement those the ways of getting that kind of content that you ultimately need. That's pretty well. You mentioned when you started that you're on the writing systems team, which is sort of parallel to the design systems team. And so I'm assuming you're like, it's almost like do you have like a AI ops now or something like that that content design and UX writing are a part of? Or tell me, I guess organizationally, how is this kind of settling in?
Yeah, no, there's not really like a AI operations team, for example, but like now that the MVP product that we built in those 2 months in the sprint is launched, it's like a traditional product that's like any other at Booking. Now there's like a more regular size team that handles this product. So it's, there's a product manager and there's a designer that I work with, and so there's a couple of researchers that are maybe split between this team and another, and a handful of engineers. Like mostly on the product team, there's like the app engineers, like iOS and Android, and then machine learning has always been a thing at Booking. So we have a separate department of teams for machine learning, and a lot of them are actually based in Tel Aviv, and we work with them virtually. And so there's like the machine learning team that works on the models, and then there's the sort of the front end team that's like making sure the experience is good, and we have to work, virtually with each other to make sure those two teams are coming together in the end. But there's not like an AI operations quite yet.
Got it. Yeah. And one thing, as you mentioned that too, another one of your new collaborators you mentioned earlier on is like data folks, like data scientists, data engineers, folks like that. How deep, again, it's kind of about like how deep in the stack are you going? I know there's a lot of concerns in that world around data pipelines, like provenance of the data and its cleanliness and tidiness and suitability for this stuff. Have you got that deep into this or?
Me personally, no. It's mostly how the researchers are interfacing with data scientists on how to pull learnings from the feedback we're getting, because we have a feedback system built into the trip planner, so they can analyze that feedback, or they can analyze the different ways people are using the tool, and like how many messages are in a conversation, or what point they're leaving the conversation, and how we can re-engage them, that sort of thing. So I haven't had the need to sit down with a data scientist yet, but we're using a lot of their findings and their reporting regularly, and we're using a lot of that information to guide us and inform some of the decisions and directions we take.
hmm Yeah, it's sort of like I was thinking just like I think the content pipeline looks differently these days, and I'm just trying to follow it as far upstream as I can. But I'm just wondering about like the day-to-day work of this. Like I guess I think one of the things I feel like you're kind of you're a little bit in the future for a lot of the folks listening. I think that you've actually built a product and shipped it, and it's it's live and it's out there. I'm just wondering how like what was can you help other folks accelerate their learning curve? Like what was the hard what would you really advise to somebody embarking on this now to like is it important to understand the tech stack or the language around this or the new roles that you're dealing with? Um,
Yeah. So when it comes to like learning a new technology to work with AI, like I said, I was already playing around with AI, so I kind of knew the lay of the land a bit, and I knew some of the lingo, so I didn't have to pick up too much. But everyone is kind of like at the moment, AI is still pretty new to everybody, so everybody's sort of picking up like what the lingo is, and what how to talk about this stuff and what it means and how to stay up with it. So it's not too hard to start reading or pick up on it. So but that will change with time, obviously, as more people do this. But I think anyone that's going to work on an AI product, it should have familiarity with some of the Gen AI tools out there, like ChatGPT, or even the visual stuff like DALL-E, and know what the strengths and weaknesses are. But those are also evolving every time there's a new release. They've gotten rid of all their most popular weaknesses, and now they have all these new strengths. But one of the things I think, like for me, that I learned or that I thought about for our writing community and writers in general, is that if you're going to be working on an AI product like this, and you're going to be working more closely with engineers on prompts, which I think is super important, being familiar with the tools that your engineers are using, or already knowing how to get around something like GitLab, so that you can submit a merge request to your engineer if you see an improvement to the prompts. Knowing that is going to be important, but I can imagine that not all writers and content designers have that sort of experience. So it definitely helps to speak the language of your engineer and be able to navigate their world a bit so that you can talk to them and have influence on the prompts. Because if we're not getting in there as writers into the prompts, then they're not going to provide the best output.
Yep. And one thing, it's been observed a lot that prompt engineering looks a lot like content design. That like, you're designing content to elicit an appropriate response from these AI agents. How does the prompt engineering talent feel at Booking? Like, is it kind of equally divided between you and the ML engineers, or does it? Tell me a little bit about that. How the prompts get written, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's during the MVP phase when we were building it, it was sort of like the UX stream and the tech team, the ML team, were sort of running side by side, but like in not really like aligning right. And then at the end, once we built something, we said, okay, let's bring this design together with all this engineering you built and see how it works. And that's where we had to do a lot of the work, was like making the things work together. But since then, so they were building a lot of the infrastructure of the prompts, and there's a lot of quote unquote engineering that goes into these prompts, because you have to connect all these different pieces and different ML models and different backend systems. And that's all the stuff that, as a writer, we don't need to think about. But there's a lot of the prompts that involve just like setting a tone of voice and, giving it examples of conversations that you want it to learn from. And if you're relying on the engineer to write that information, then they might not, write it in the way that you want to as a writer. And so if you go in there and you give it better instructions on how to speak or how to have a conversation with your user, you're going to have a better output. And some of the instructions, it's about giving a complex instruction to the bot so it can do something with your instructions. And developers, they always want to talk about writing clean code that's like efficient, but maybe when it comes to writing a prompt in English, they're not the best at explaining a complex topic in a really simple amount of language. And that's something UX writers really excel at. So if we get in there, we can actually help them to improve, the outputs of some of just their technical prompts, because we can maybe shorten some of their sentences. And with all this AI stuff, it's all about, not using too many tokens so that the AI can, read all of your instructions and not forget anything. So the shorter and simpler you can make those instructions while still having the same impact is really important. So that's like one of the ways the writers can sort of get in there and improve the code, as it were, and really help the product get better and produce better outputs.
I love that. Yet another argument for plain language and simplified and terse and concise, because you're paying for those tokens and you better tighten it up. Hey, one thing, is I'm kind of a content management nerd, and I just am like, and I've done a few of these kinds of projects, and am already hitting the challenges of like how to manage these prompts. Like they're sort of like they're built into like, custom GPTs that you build yourself, or prompt chains that you build in different ways. How do you have and you're a systems guy, so I'm going to guess that you have as good a chance of figuring this out as anyone. Do you have ways of like kind of managing, and also like kind of maybe learning from, like, developing prompt styles, or prompting best practices and things like that?
Well, we've been sharing our learnings internally, just sort of like I said when we were talking beforehand, that I spoke at an internal UX conference, and I gave a bit of feedback about the things we learned from building this product. So we're sort of sharing those prompt learnings internally, but we don't have anything set up in place to like create guidelines just yet. We're still at the early stages of figuring out how AI is going to impact our workflows and things like that. Because this is like one product that is a generative AI customer facing thing, but there's going to be a lot of AI impact in workflow that's just like productivity and things like that. So when it comes to like, one of the reasons we were able to so quickly roll out this trip planner was because we have a really flexible design system in place. And I wouldn't say that we had to build any new components for that. Like we didn't have to build like an AI component for our design system. We were able to sort of, because we've done chat interfaces before, we've done even chatbots before. And so we could pull in existing pieces of our design system, and that was one of the reasons why it was so easy to or quickly able to design something, was because of that design system. But I can imagine in the future that as we reimagine the way a user interacts with generative AI chatbot, we might want to rethink what some of these components look like or the way that they behave, especially when you see every day there's new advancements coming out, whether it's from Google or OpenAI, and just how the AI can respond to you and thinking of new interfaces and new ways. And so I can imagine that these components will need to evolve soon, but we haven't had to make those changes just yet.
Yeah, you're reminding me that like the profession of conversational design has been around for a while. Like I know, like 30 years ago, they were doing IVR stuff for phone systems, and there's a well-established discipline there. And I can see that showing up in your chat agents that you already had at booking. So that kind of goes back to what I was thinking earlier about like the UI, to the end user, it doesn't look or feel that much different, but boy, the stuff under the hood has changed a lot. But that's interesting. But so far, so good. The design system is holding up and giving you what you need to express this stuff. Hey, I want to circle back, Chris, because I loved what you said earlier. I don't want to let this hang because I think it might be also a way for folks who are like not reticent, but like just kind of trying to find a way into this. Your story robot with your toddler, I just love that idea of like, hey, let's ask this story, the story robot, what kind of story we're gonna tell tonight. Tell me a little bit about what you learned in that, and sort of like your prototyping and testing with your kid.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty simple. It was just like he like, at bedtime he had, he'd kind of gone through the same books we have at home several times, and he would like to create his own stories just based on maybe what he did that day. It was sort of like, tell me what Spider-Man did today. It's like, oh, he went to the zoo and he saw an alligator. And it's like things that maybe Spider-Man never does in a traditional Spider-Man story. But then if you tell ChatGPT, hey, I'm writing a bedtime story, make it about Spider-Man going to the zoo, it might write a story about Spider-Man going to the zoo, but I found out pretty quickly that you had to give it better instructions for it to be maybe like age appropriate, or maybe to be more of a bedtime story rather than just a story. So the more instructions I started inserting into this thing, and then I would just like add the details that my son wanted at the end, it got a lot better. So at some point it was like, I have a 3-year-old, it's bedtime. I need like a short 5-minute story, and here's what needs to be in it. And then they started to give it's sort of like what I learned with the trip planners, like the better instructions you give it, the better output you're going to get. And so in the end, and now I'm thinking I need to go back to that and see how I can integrate the illustrations, because I think that was the one thing my son was always bummed out. It's like he would watch the text appear on my phone by ChatGPT word by word, and he'd be like, wow, it's so fast. And then there'd be no images. You'd be like, where are the pictures? And so I think that's one thing I'll be interested to do now that ChatGPT has a DALL-E built into it, is like I can actually ask it to create some illustrations, and that'll probably really, really blow his mind.
No kidding. Yeah, because the multimodal stuff is definitely coming in here. I haven't looked at it yet, but Gemini, this is so weird. We're recording this on December 8th. I'll probably release it in 2 or 3 weeks. And half the stuff we say will be out of date by then, probably, the way things are moving here. But just, I think it was just a day or two ago, Google released the Gemini stuff. And I think that had some multimodal stuff in it. But I know that the new Chat GPT does as well. Hey, another thing I wanted to ask you about. There's a lot of concern about job security among content folks these days. How are you feeling about that? Like, the prospects of the UX writing, world in this new world. Do you feel like the robots are actually coming for our jobs, or is there still going to be stuff for us to do?
Yeah, I know this is like, I think your favorite question to ask on the podcast is like, is Gen AI coming for our jobs? I'm not too worried about it coming for the job of UX writers, at least not yet. With Gen AI, I guess we can never say never. A few years from now, who knows what it'll be able to do. But I sort of see this in two different parts. First, there's like the productivity piece that I mentioned. Most people are probably more likely to experience AI these days through enhancements to their productivity or through their company trying to improve productivity. So in that sense, like AI is having really big impacts by reducing redundant busy work, and that frees up more time for us to like be more strategic or think more about content strategy, that sort of stuff. and instead of spending all that time on completing tasks. And so someone at our company said it this way, and I thought it was really nice, is that the first thing that the AI machines are going to replace are the old bad machines. And a lot of our systems and tools are going to get smarter and more efficient. And so for writers, AI is just another tool in our toolbox, and we should be getting familiar with it because, and I think I heard someone else say this on your podcast, and I was going to say the same thing, is that, UX writers won't necessarily be replaced by AI. They'll be replaced by other UX writers that know how to use AI. So you should be getting familiar with this stuff so that you can continue to grow and be relevant in the business. And the second part is, if you're actually working on an AI product, a strong UX writer is really critical to the success of those projects. As I experienced with the trip planner at Booking, using my UX writing skills in the prompts in the code was just as impactful in the end as using our skills for UI copy that we traditionally work on. So the AI models, they sometimes, like I said, they have a complex set of instructions, and we're really good at expressing complex things in a short way. So I think writers will be indispensable to AI because the code is just writing, and it's kind of like the developers have to learn a new language. And maybe if English isn't their first language, it's easier for us as writers to improve the code in that sense. And if we're not in there influencing the way that the AI is generating the content, then who else in the product team is going to be standing up for, brand, tone of voice, consistency of terminology, inclusive language, things like this? It's all the stuff that we worry about all the time, but now it's just a new way to have that influence.
Yeah, we're still human-centered designers. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about that, like, even as these agents appear more and more human, they're still machines, and it's still HCI, it's still human computer interaction, and we're still involved in that. I think we just need to, it's probably going to be more important as we go along to just remind ourselves of that we're, and this should all be in service to humanity. It's like, I personally don't want to live in a world of robot overlords, but hey, Chris, I can't believe we're coming up close to time. Is there anything that's come up in the conversation that you'd like to revisit, or that you just want to make sure we share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess the main thrust I'm trying to promote at the moment is that thing we just talked about, which is that I don't think writers should be worried about AI replacing them. I guess it's easy for me to say when I'm at a company with 80 plus UX writers, we're probably not going to get rid of 80 people to replace them with AI. But, there might be a startup out there that's thinking, oh, maybe they were thinking they were going to hire a UX writer, and maybe now they'll think about if AI can help them. But I think in general, the skills out there that we have as writers can have a huge impact in when products involve AI. And otherwise, we're just going to have our productivity improved by using AI as a tool, as people have said on your podcast, and I've repeated again. It's a tool that we need to learn to use, and it'll improve everything in that sense. So, and the only other thing I'll say is that I'm trying to write a blog post about this very same thing. So hopefully by the time this episode comes out, it'll be published and people can check out blog.booking.com, and it should be available there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had if you had documented this in a blog post, but I always feel guilty about that. As a former editor, I always feel like I'm making an assignment when I just asking the question. So I'm glad to hear that you're already on that. So, hey, one very last thing, Chris. If folks want to stay in touch, what's the best way to connect with you online or follow you?
Yeah, I'm not super online professionally, but I guess if people want to find me, LinkedIn is the best way. You just search for my name and Booking, and you'll probably find me.
Excellent. Well, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Larry.
For show notes and to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at contentandai.com. And please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening.